And on this week's show, leading rail industry manager Alex Hynes has been appointed Director General of the DfT's new Rail Infrastructure and Service Delivery Group. Is this finally some good news? Our very own cheerful Charlie, Richard, however, spills the beans on a hitherto unknown exchange that took place during the rail review in 2004, which he was involved in, and why we may need to heed the lessons of history. Auditors question the going concern status of a very well-known heritage railway. Is the sector finally sliding into real crisis? The Prime Minister is at it again with his private jets. The M25 is closed for a weekend, and we ask if National Highways have done any media training lately. Richard experiences rail fares madness at first hand and tells us about it. And some good news, Marylebone celebrates 125 years of life. Not bad, considering it very nearly became a coach park in the 1980s. Hello, and welcome to Green Signals from me, Nigel Harris, and away there in Gloucestershire.
Wiltshire, please. Wiltshire.
Oh, sorry.
Goodness me, you've just offended a lot of people. Anyway, so welcome from Richard Bowker here in Wiltshire.
That's what you call a great start. And you'll notice we haven't re-recorded it. Oh, stop it, Richard.
Sorry. Apologies.
It's early yet, and I'm not quite caffeinated. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. See, I had you down as a neighbour of Prince Charles. Sorry, the King. See, I did it again. Right, I'm just going to stick to the script in future.
3 strikes and you're out.
I know. We hope you're enjoying listening to Green Signals as much as we are writing and recording our podcast. We put the show out as an audio podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, and loads of other platforms. But we also have a YouTube channel where, in addition to the weekly shows, which you can listen to in audio form or watch the video pods, we also have videos such as Richard's recent trip showing GWR Pullman dining, and didn't he have a good time? Around 2/3 of our viewers and listeners on YouTube are not actually subscribed. So if you can, please do press the subscribe button. You do have to create a YouTube account to do that, but it's really easy to do. Then you can subscribe, and it really does help. It's completely free, and there aren't many things you can say that about nowadays. Right, we got a slightly different show today. We're going to review quite a few stories that of themselves may not have made big headlines, but actually they are interesting, and in some cases they could yet turn out to have significant impact. But our first story definitely qualifies as big. So it is genuinely big news to kick off with. ScotRail Alliance Managing Director Alex Hynes has been appointed Director General of the DfT's new Rail Industry and Service Delivery Group, the team that is expected to transfer to GBR when the Rail Reform Bill becomes law, if it becomes law. So finally, we will see an actual, seasoned, experienced, and indeed rather successful railway leader right in the heart of government handling railways. Richard, surely even you, oh God, he's laughing already, must be happy about this. And it's important to note that this is a 2-year initial secondment from ScotRail. Richard, go.
I'm delighted. I'm genuinely happy.
Praise the Lord.
He's a great guy. Those who know Alex will know he's very able, but he's also a lovely guy as well.
Agreed.
So, I am happy. I suppose the challenge, there's going to be some challenges ahead, but let's not take away from the fact that finally, as you say, we've got a genuine railway leader right in the heart of the DfT. And, when you do that, when you put somebody in like that, what they are and who they are rubs off on the people around them. It's unavoidable, right? So from that
clashes
point
with
of
the
view,
people around them.
well, not necessarily. Well, there might be, but everybody has a kind of clash from time to time. It's not necessarily a bad thing, is it? But I just think his infectious desire for the railway and to get things done and do them properly, and and pace, because that's probably one thing that the DfT don't have in abundance will rub off, and that is a really, really good thing. So let us celebrate that. It is a reason to be happy.
And he has considerable charm, it must be said, which will not be lost on.
Yeah, no, he does. He has real charm. Yeah,
he does.
However,
here it comes.
No, there is no but coming. There really isn't. I genuinely read that and heard that yesterday and thought, oh, good. However, he is one guy, right? And as good as he is, and he is really good, he is one guy. And I think the thing that we mustn't do as an industry, well, we must support him, continue to cheer for him, but we mustn't expect miracles to happen on day one, because they won't. He's going to take time to acclimatise. It is different. It is the Department for Transport. It's a central government, department. And he'll need to get used to that. And we're going to have to give him some space, because it's not going to happen immediately. I worry that there is a danger the industry might put too much expectation and pressure on him from day one. And that would be bad, because that's not fair, actually.
And we mustn't do that either.
And we mustn't do that. No, we will. Alex, if you're listening, and we know you do listen, we're absolutely delighted, and more power to you. We will carry on being cheerleaders from the sidelines. But I just hope the rest of the industry doesn't just go, well, why haven't you fixed everything? Well, because it's not that straightforward. But one of the interesting things is, of course, that this new team that Alex is going to be leading is planned to be moved over to GBR if and when that becomes a reality, which is fun. We said that on the show with Andrew Hynes, if you remember. We actually said, Tupi's going to apply. Are you looking forward to welcoming these people into your organisation? And
we did.
He smiled a bit. So we've always known that was going to happen. It will migrate over. But it did kind of make me think, well, what's actually going to get left in the DFT? And that's where, I know I'm speculating, but that's where the worry comes from. It comes a bit, I guess, because central government departments, once they've got a grip on something, have quite a good, strong track record of not letting go, because they kind of think that that's all about, control and so on and so forth. Kind of brought to mind my experience back in 2004 with the rail review, which was kind of slightly in the reverse, but it did remind me that none of this is straightforward and none of it's done till it's done. And that was obviously over the rail review in 2004. And what happened there is quite fascinating. It is the lesson of history, really. And I'll tell you something that I actually haven't told anybody. I think I might have told Tom Windsor, actually, but I've not told anybody else, and certainly not publicly in 20 years.
Now it can be told, eh?
Well, yeah, I'm not very good at all of this. Let's go back and lifting the veil. There's no book in me, that's for sure. I'm not interested in stuff like that, and I don't like telling tales. But this is relevant. Okay,
fire away. Come on.
So remember, you're a gog. Okay. Do you remember when Alistair Darling announced the outcome of the rail review?
I do.
And he did it. In fact, I just printed off the relevant bit. He did it in July 2004. It's 15th of July, so you can look it up on Hansard. And he said the following, right? He said, The proposals that I'm announcing today streamline the structure and organisation of the railway. Now, bearing in mind the proposals were basically bringing the SRA into the Department of Transport, and I think moving the Railway Inspectorate into the ORR. That was basically
Yes, it was.
Right? So they're going to streamline the structure and organisation of the railway. They provide a single point of accountability for performance. I've never understood quite why he thought that, but anyway. They allow closer working between track and train and provide for greater local and devolved decision-making. Together, these proposals will make sure that Britain's railways are run in the public interest for the benefit of its passengers and freight customers. Well, you could write the same sentence about 10 times in the next 20 years, really. But anyway, this was the key point. He then explained what he was doing. First, the government will take charge of setting the overall strategy for the railways. It must be for ministers accountable to Parliament and to the electorate to set the national strategy for the railways.
Yep.
The message being, because at the moment, I can't do that, right?
Because you were.
Yeah, the SRA is doing that. And it must be for ministers. Ministers should do this. We're accountable to the electorate, so we're going to take charge of the overall strategy, right? Now, I know lots of here, and waving of order papers and all that kind of nonsense. Now, the bit that people don't know is the conversations that took place prior to that. So on an eyes-only basis, Alistair let me see what he was going to say in advance of him saying it. And I had a look. And then I went to see him. One-on-one. One-on-one. Right. Just him and me.
Private.
No officials.
No official. That is unusual.
No, it is unusual, and they hate it, but no officials. And he said, what do you think? And I said, well, look, at the end of the day, this is a political decision. You've decided you want to do this, for whatever reason. I said, but you just must be aware of one thing. This bit here, which is the bit I've just read out to you, you've got to be careful saying that you're going to do something and give the impression you can't do it, because you can. And he said, what do you mean? Oh. So we got the Transport Act 2000 out. He used to have a copy of various bits and bobs on a shelf in the office at Great Minster House. So I went and got the 2000 Act. And I found the paragraph, and I read this. So this is in section 206, which again you can look at on the internet. It's all about the creation of the Strategic Rail Authority. It says the authority shall formulate and keep under review strategies with respect to its purposes. Right? But then it says in little section 3 of section 206, the Secretary of State may give the authority directions and guidance in relation to its strategies, in particular in relation to A, the matters to be covered by them, B, the issues to be taken account of in formulating them, C, the strategy to be adopted in relation to any matter, and D, the updating of them. So in English, if the Secretary of State decided he wanted the Strategic Rail Authority to produce a strategy on a particular matter, and indeed how to produce that strategy, he could direct them to do so. Right?
Already under the existing legislation.
Yeah, that was in the Transport Act. So so ministers could direct strategy, right? So the one thing I am still of the view is that the 2004 Railways Rail Review did not need to do, which arguably was the only thing it actually said it did do, was bring strategy direction back into the Department of Transport, because they already had the power. They'd just chosen not to really use it. So
you told him that he already had the power to do what he was going to stand up in Parliament and say he was changing things to do. And so presumably, if I'm reading this right, the only reason he went ahead and still did it after you'd told him he could already do those things is to get rid of the SRA.
Well, that bit, I've never asked, and I can't ask now for obvious reasons. I've never had that conversation, because I'm a big believer in never ask a question you don't really want to hear the answer to, right? So I don't know, and I'll never know. But it's not an unreasonable hypothesis, what you've just said. But either way, one thing I'm clear about is that he could, or when I say he, I don't mean he personally, I mean the Secretary of State could direct strategy under the 2000 Act. So that for me, the Rail Review was always a bit of a pointless exercise, really. So if he wanted to bring the SRA into the DfT, he could have just said, that's what I want to do, right?
So effectively, you told him there was no need to stand up and say all that, because he could already do all those things, but he effectively stood up and said it anyway.
Oh, pretty much. And then interestingly, after that, at some point, I forget exactly when it was, I sat down with the then permanent secretary, Sir David Rowlands, talking about the timing of my departure from the SRA. And I repeated this and said, look, I think you and I both know that under the 2000 Act, the Secretary of State, the office of the Secretary of State, already had the power to do this stuff. You didn't need to bring the SRA into the DfT. And he just looked at me. And my point is this.
You can't trust him.
Well, government departments they get very nervous about ceding power. Because in that instance, right, in the 2004, they found a way to get it back. Right? They'd never been happy when Prescott created the Strategic Rail Authority. They found a way to get it back. And that's my lesson of history, really. Just be really careful. I mean, all of this stuff we're hearing at the moment, rail reform bill, sounds great, but it's as good as where it ends up, not where it starts.
And I guess a big lesson for there is for Alex Hynes. Take contemporaneous notes of everything that he's talked about, discussed, and everything else, because what you're saying is just shows you can't trust him.
Well, Alex is his own man, and he's a good guy, and he's pretty experienced. Bear in mind, this guy's, I mean, look at what he's done. I mean, he ran Northern.
He did.
you certainly get a few grey hairs doing that, and he's been in Scotland, which is quite a political environment because, you know, the Scottish government's is very active. Let's just put it that way. It's very active in the way it gets involved in things. And he's coped brilliantly with those. He's succeeded despite that. So I am very confident that Alex will give a really good shot at this. But I suppose my comment about the Rail Review 2004 is really a bit of a kind of a warning moment for the entire industry. What matters with this, all of this process, is where we end up.
Indeed.
Because, control is not given away
easily,
lightly.
Yeah. No, it's not. And the point you just made there about Alex is that he manages up very well. What everyone normally sees and comments on is the output of managing down into the railway. And he's going to have to draw heavily on those skills in managing the civil servants, because I understand the civil service is expanding rapidly, isn't it, Richard?
Well, I did notice. It's interesting you say that. I saw this thing, and I've not checked the quality of the source. The source is right, but I mean, I don't know. You know, some sources or some reports are written from a very specific point of view, and I don't know whether this one's been written from that. But I did find a thing which there's a website you can go to called UK and a Changing Europe, which suggests they've written a paper called Brexit and the State, where they say that 100,000 extra civil servants have been hired to deal with sort of the consequences of Brexit policy. There's that wonderful bit. You're a fan of Yes Minister, aren't you? Yes,
I am huge. Yeah. A documentary, not a comedy.
I tell you what, I absolutely can concur with that. There's a wonderful episode, I need to dig it out, where Jim Hackett decides to have an efficiency drive, and Humphrey, because I think it's in Yes Minister, it's before it becomes PM, does this brilliant job of explaining why, if you're going to have an efficiency drive, you actually need more civil servants. And it's a superb episode. And I think, as you say, a documentary.
My favourite bit was, I think, in the very first one, where Hacker says to Humphrey, "Well, I'm glad you answered all my questions." And so Humphrey says, "I'm glad you thought so, Minister."
That is absolutely priceless, isn't it? Yes.
Speaking of the DfT, though, Richard, we do have some very clear good news for Green Signals.
We do.
We do. Minister, we like good news. Minister for Rail, Hugh Merriman, I am delighted to announce, has accepted our invitation to join us on the show for a big interview. His office have confirmed it. He was actually meant to be joining us this very week, but unfortunately something came up in his diary to bump us. So we're eagerly awaiting a new date promised by his office, and we'll keep everybody posted.
It's exciting, that, isn't it? I mean, fair play to him. So it'll be good.
It is, and it can be assured of an objective, courteous, but challenging conversation.
Totally.
Absolutely. We're fairness personified. Okay. On to the news. The heritage rail sector in the UK has been a real success story over the last 70 years, since the Talyllyn blazed a trail, with standard gauge preservation coming along in 1959 with the Middleton Railway in Leeds and the Bluebell. And far from being just an opportunity for individuals to enjoy their hobbies, the sector has become a massive tourism magnet and a big employer and a major contributor. Richard mentioned in a previous pod that if you strung all the heritage railways together, they'd have about 400 miles, which is nearly as long as the 401.25 miles of the West Coast Main Line. So there's a lot of it. Anyway, for more than 15 years, the North Yorkshire Moors Railway was the envy of the heritage sector because Yorkshire TV's and subsequently ITV's popular Sunday evening cosy drama Heartbeat was filmed around the line, and the village of Goathland, together with its station and the steam trains, became the fictional village of Aidensfield, where former EastEnders star Nick Berry played Constable Nick Rowan and showed his adventures. Other major stars included Niamh Cusack and Derek Foles, who was also in Yes Minister. The show ran for an incredible 18 series in total from 1992 until 2012, regularly capturing 10 million viewers in the 1990s, with a peak audience of more than 13 million viewers in 2001. Now, I say all that to illustrate the massive publicity from which the North Yorkshire Moors Railway benefited and profited considerably during that period, with booming passenger figures. It seemed to have the Midas touch. But Richard, what went wrong? I understand you've been digging in the accounts, and as a fully fledged accountant, you know what you're looking at. Maybe you can tell us what you've deduced with, sorry, forgive me, without boring us rigid with accountant speak.
That's fair enough. Yeah, I think just by way of context, this is one heritage railway, and even a cursory glance around the sector suggests there's a lot of people. Yeah, there's a lot of people with real challenges. So no one should think this is just one that's got an issue. But the reason why this story came about, because BBC, I think the sort of local news ran a story on the 14th of March talking about accounts. And I think it will have been because the North Yorkshire Moors had to submit their accounts to the Charity Commission because the parent company is a charity. And that's what triggered the story. Now, the actual accounts in question relate to the year ended 28th of February 2023.
So just over a year ago.
Over a year ago. And because certainly a PLC, which the one of the companies have to file them within 6 months. In a way, these have been in the public domain for about 6 months, but I think it just came out because of this Charity Commission thing. Now, it is complicated, and we've got to be really careful here because we don't want to be so superficial that the North Yorkshire Moors Railway quite rightly says, well, hang on a minute, you haven't mentioned that, and that. Right, so we've got to be very careful. But in common with a lot of these heritage railways, North Yorkshire Moors has a charitable trust company that sits, if you like, as the parent at the top. And that's where all the heritage assets are. That's where they do the fundraising, all the gift aid and the charity stuff and all that kind of thing. And then they have another company that does the operating of the railway.
Actually runs the trains.
Usually under a contract. And I think there is a thing in place with the North Yorkshire Moors Railway called the collaboration agreement or something that actually that kind of contractualizes that. I
think the Bluebell does a similar thing.
I think that quite a few do something.
Quite a few,
yeah. And it's quite logical because the fundraising and tax and gift aid and charity stuff kind of needs to sit somewhere else. It does. So although the story in the BBC was about the charity accounts, which is actually what we're just going to very briefly look at are the operating company accounts, which are North Yorkshire Moors Railway PLC, because those tell us the story of how trading is going. Okay,
how healthy the railway is as a business, if you like.
I mean, it's almost like the money that comes in from selling stuff with the stuff that goes out that costs them to run it, right? These are the accounts for the end of February 2023. And as you said, a year ago, and it'll be another 6 months before we get the ones from the end of February 24.
Okay,
so that's where we are. And when you look at them, it's quite interesting. They say that turnover's actually up a bit in that year, but the cost of sales and the administrative costs are up by more. And the net effect is that the operating company lost £600,000, actually £599,000.
Wow, that's a big number.
It is a big number. It is a big number, which compared to the year before, which was the year ended 22, they actually made a tiny surplus of £6,000, right? So that's a big swing.
So it's gone south by nearly £500,000 or so.
Yeah, £600,000, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And it's actually slightly more problematic than that because, and this is an accounting point, in the profit and loss account for the year ended February 23, the directors in producing accounts have what's called released a provision. Now, they have a thing called the deferred maintenance provision,
I'm
right?
getting a headache.
Well, it's important, this, I'm afraid.
I know it's important. I'm just trying to keep up.
And what they've done, their notes to their accounts are very clear. You can see exactly what they've done, right? And what they do is they say, they've got this thing called a deferred provision. So they are required to maintain certain third-party assets. There might be heritage assets or whatever used on the railway, and they make a provision for the cost of maintenance for that. And
could be locomotives or carriages, I guess.
I guess. But it looks like they've actually made too much of a provision, so they don't need it all. So they've released some of that to the profit and loss account. Actually, of the however much there was, I think there's about 600,000. They've released 417,000 to the P&L. So that 600,000 loss without that maintenance release would have been just over $1 million.
Oh, good heavens.
Right, that's the effect it has. Now, there's nothing untoward. I mean, they've been very clear about what they've done. But what it means is, on a like-for-like basis, from a trading point of view, that's £1 million loss. Okay. When you look at the balance sheet of the operating company, unsurprisingly, there's not really much on there. The net assets, so that's all their assets minus all their liabilities, it's about 300 grand now. It was a lot more, but that loss of 600,000 has brought it down from 900 and something to 300 and something. And the only slight challenge with it is that when you then look at their cash flow, they've consumed more than half the cash they had at the start of the year. So they went from, I forget the precise numbers now, but they definitely have consumed sufficient cash that they now don't, at the end of February 23, they didn't have enough left to consume the same amount again. Do you know what I mean? So, the result of all of this, and the thing that the BBC picked up on, was the auditors said, they made a comment about going concern. And this is the key bit, right? And what they said was, these events or conditions, along with the other matters as set forth in the notes, indicate that a material uncertainty exists that may cast significant doubt on the company's ability to continue as a going concern. Now, there is a bit in the notes. You have to read the notes and all of it, because there's a lot of good stuff in there that explains what's going on. And the directors of the North Yorkshire Moors Railway have been quite open. They said, look, we know it's really tough at the moment. They talk about Ukraine and coal prices and so on. And they list the things they're doing to correct the situation. And
so they've got a plan.
They've clearly got a plan, right?
Good.
But notwithstanding that, the auditors have still said, yeah, well, okay, but we think on the basis of this, there's a material doubt. And
material uncertainty.
And that is problematic, really, because now, I suppose the good news is, were the finance director of the NYMR here, he would say, well, 12 months on, right?
And it is a year ago, yeah.
We're still here, all right? And we're doing the things. And actually, when the BBC ran this story and obviously asked for a comment, because the finance director said that the report had reflected the situation at the time it was compiled, obviously a year ago. And he said, however, between February 23 and February 24, we've made some huge changes. That's resulted in a big positive movement to profitability of around £500,000, actually. He said he was extremely positive about the 2024 season, which is obviously the one we're going into, and was forecasting a further improvement. So he said, we've come through the winter with cash headroom, so any potential problem has gone away. Now, well, look, he knows his numbers, and to the nth degree. So we shouldn't question his.
Nor are we.
No, I'm not sure I'd have phrased it quite like that, but only because I don't think the what they call the negative headwinds, the economic headwinds that are affecting the sector, they haven't gone away.
They
right?
haven't.
And I think when you look at this, what you see is an example of a sector that is in very, very tough trading conditions. They have no free reserves, really. And so it does say to me that these guys are doing they're having a really tough time. And clearly they're doing something well, because all of these guys are still going, but it must be really, really tough. And it does make you think, can you, it's a bit hand to mouth, and can it keep going on?
But when your auditor, albeit a year ago, says there's a material uncertainty about whether you're a going concern or not, that sounds like it's teetering on the edge.
Yeah, it's one of those phrases that is, you don't ever want to see it written. And as we say, in fairness to them, they don't shy away from it. They accept in the report.
And all credit to them for that.
Well, yeah, they accept. They say this in the report. Whilst the directors recognise the challenges and uncertainties that the railway faces, they believe that with continued support from the bank, the actions being implemented, together with their collaboration agreement, which is the thing that they've got with the parent company, that they will continue as a going concern. And, they know their business, but it does feel as if the whole sector has got some real challenges at the moment.
It does, doesn't it? And there in the North Yorkshire Moors Railway, we're talking about a very mature railway. It opened on May the 1st, I think, 1973. The reason I remember that is I think it opened the day before the Lakeside and Haverthwaite Railway, May 2nd, 1973. Right. That's why it sticks in the memory. So they've been going a long time. They had the magnificent benefits of Heartbeat. They've got the scenery, the number of visitors up there. Whitby's on the doorstep. They extended the railway into Whitby. And yet, here we are. Somebody told me earlier today that an adult return over the full Yorkshire Moors Railway is 49 quid. Well, if you've got two kids, the good thing is apparently kids go free. But by the time you've bought burgers and ice creams, you've got, in today's trading conditions, that's a big ask, isn't it? And I just wonder whether the day of the shorter railway is upon us. Will they be more resilient? The 5 miles and under, the Worth Valley Railways, the Lakeside Railways, the Middleton Railways, the East Somerset Railways, the ones that are small and beautifully formed because they've got lower infrastructure and maintenance costs and liabilities, and they've got more affordable fares. You put yourself in the position of, and as you say, it's not just the North Yorkshire Moors, let's not just focus on them, but if you're a family, well, you are a family man, and you've got a choice between going to, I don't know, a Severn Valley or a Blue, but one of the big boys, the Premier League, with the fares that go with it, or a 2-mile railway down the road, it could well be to the advantage of those shorter railways, because it makes your money go further.
I mean, I really feel for these guys. Not far from where we are is the Gloucestershire and Warwickshire Railway, and that's a beautiful railway.
It is.
And they've had to stump up, I think it's over £1 million.
Big problems with earthworks.
Well, Stanway Viaduct, I believe, was the real issue, and they've had to close that and do huge amounts of work. I mean, these are serious amounts of money. So maybe you've got a point, and maybe that's something that all these guys have got
we ought to look at. I mean, the Severn Valley has also had real problems with earthworks and big expenses and civil engineering. Here's a little side issue. There's a spot on the Severn Valley, I can't quite remember what it's called, that's always been on the move since they built it. And I was lucky enough to have one of the drivers take me for quite a few footplate turns a few years ago. And we're going past this place, it's Stearns. And he pointed across this, and there's a telegraph pole in what's a field away. So that's where the railway used to be. Because of so they've got all that. The Severn Valley has sold Stanier Black 5 45110. It was one of the very last 1968 end of steam Black 5s, and it's really iconic. It's symbolic. They've sold it to raise funds. I'm hearing problems, on the Bluebell, maybe the Kent and East Sussex, the Great Central Railway. Asked for volunteers for redundancies. Now, when I was on the board there about 10, 15 years ago, there were about 50 staff, and I can't think it's much different now, but they're looking for 25 volunteers for redundancies. They got one. So
Do they really?
I really, really, really feel for Malcolm Holmes, the general manager, having some very difficult decisions to make to find 25 redundancies.
It is.
So
It is tough. It is
these
tough.
Premier League railways are clearly really feeling it. We'll have to have a bit of a look round at some of the
We
others,
will.
Richard.
A bit of self-promotion. I did write an article in the
You did?
excellent Trackside magazine, actually, which we'll put a link to Trackside up on the website about this very issue.
I started in railway journalism in 1981 as assistant editor at Steam World. And then the biggest name on that circuit was Michael Draper, who was the general manager of the Severn Valley Railway. And he wrote a very controversial article, which I pointed you at when you were writing yours, forecasting just this, that the day would come when they were going to, it's going to be survival of the fittest. Railways wouldn't be able to survive. There'd be too many of them, some harsh decisions needed. Yep. Well, maybe it's taking some time, but there are some harsh decisions. And what it proves is it's no longer, not that it has been for 20 years, acceptable for boards to not be made up of some serious business people with some serious business skills, because the costs and liabilities and everything else are significant. Right, back to our Prime Minister. We see he's been at it again. He reportedly ordered an RAF Dassault Falcon to fly him from Northolt to Darlington and back for his rather cringeworthy People's Panel. On the assumption, and we think it's a fair one, he was actually going to central London. RAF Northolt is materially less convenient than King's Cross for a journey to Darlington. Madness. Richard?
It's madness, isn't it? Yeah, no, it is madness.
Arrogant madness to that.
Well, what I don't get, right, is why his people, whether they're PR, his minders, whatever you want to call them.
The optics, Prime Minister, the optics.
Well, you can imagine the conversation. Look, Prime Minister, I know you hate trains. I mean, can you just imagine this going like this? I know you hate trains. I hate trains. Dreadful, awful things. However, you're going to have to suck it up for the sake of the cameras this time, sir, because there is a direct railway line, which
King's Cross,
ironically
Darlington.
We actually own. It's in the public sector. And it's really, really good from Darlington to King's Cross. And we can't sell this. We can't explain it. So this time you're going to have to use the train. And you can go on then, right? But no, I don't get it. It is tin-eared, isn't it?
Well, he either doesn't get it or he doesn't care. It's got to be one of the two, hasn't it? Because the optics are appalling.
They are genuine on this occasion. I mean, normally I can say, "Oh yeah, I know, he's going from a place that's difficult to get to another place that's difficult to get to. Yeah, no time, all the rest of it." No, this is London to Darlington. I mean, it couldn't get more straightforward by rail.
A half-hour road journey to King's Cross, and maybe at the other end, but no, we'll drive to Northolt and scramble an RAF Dassault jet. Oh,
I know. We've got another road story.
We have.
We have the M25, Britain's favourite motorway. Right?
We haven't gone mad.
No, actually, you're right. That was a slightly weird sort of linkage, wasn't it? Anyway, it was closed. It was closed for an entire weekend from the evening of Friday the 15th. Well, I think it was supposed to open on Monday the 18th, but I think they actually opened it a bit early.
They got it 6 hours early, and it was between junctions 10 and 11 for the first time since it was opened in 1980, whenever it was.
So well done for that. That was good. There was a brilliant story, though, in the Independent by the always excellent Simon Calder.
Too.
He's brilliant. With some priceless quotes from the National Highways senior project manager, Jonathan Wade, including these. Avoid travelling completely or find something to do at home. Decorate the bathroom or something, or play in the garden.
How condescending.
And then he said, if you must go, travel by train, walk, use a bicycle. I don't really mind what you do. That bit, if you must go. If you must go, then travel by train. I mean, it is a sentence dripping with condescension for anybody stupid enough to ever want to normally travel by train. I just thought, I don't know, it shouldn't do, but it wound me up.
No, it wound me up. I mean, the one sort of, I suppose, bit of good news in there, but however they presented it, they were saying travel by train, so that's something you don't offer any government department say.
No, that's true.
Right. stories continue to assail us from all sides, not least from the great Simon Calder, who writes about this sort of thing very regularly. Oddities of the fares system, and proof that it's neither simple nor affordable at times. Now, after you, me, and Steph had a strategy day over here in Lincolnshire a couple of weeks ago, Richard, you had very personal experience of this, didn't you?
I did. I did. Now, I should say right at the beginning of this is not a go at any one particular train operating company, right? It just so happened to be, obviously, from Peterborough. Guess what? I had to travel by. I mean, LNER was the logical thing. I think this arises because of the engine, the fares engine that drives all these sites. Yeah. So this is not about not having a go. We're certainly not having a go at LNER. But I did have quite an experience. So on the 13th of March, which was obviously the day after, I needed to get a train back to Chippenham, which is in Wiltshire.
You just can't help yourself, can you?
No, can't help
you just can't help yourself.
No, anyway. The LNER and GWR sites both showed the 10:11, so the 11 minutes past 10 departure from Peterborough to King's Cross, and then a transfer to Paddington for the Paddington to Chippenham train as £152.50. So from Peterborough to Chippenham, all through, but departing on the 10:11.
Single booking.
Yeah, £152.50. I thought, oh, gee, that's a bit steep. So I decided to do some split ticketing research. And as a result, I still got the 10:11 from Peterborough to King's Cross, which cost me £26.90.
Bargain, LNER.
Yep. Thank you, David. And then I caught the 12:15 from Paddington to Chippenham, which was £32.50. Now,
another bargain.
Another bargain. Thank you, Mr. Hopwood. Now, I knew I would need to pay a further £3 on the tube, for the transfer. And I was taking the risk that I could do it in an hour and a quarter. Now, as it turned out, that was ludicrously too much. I actually did it in about 30 minutes. But the net effect was my journey cost me 63 quid or thereabouts because I knew about split ticketing. But it would have cost £152.50 if I'd slavishly followed what the ticketing site said.
Wow.
That's a £90 difference.
The thick end of 100 quid.
Yeah, more than double what I ended up paying. So I was very pleased with myself, but I just thought, jeepers, yeah.
And you can see, well, two things. People in the industry sometimes wonder why customers think they're being ripped off. Well, they are, and you were. But of course, the government is going to introduce an industry-wide single ticketing site, isn't? Oh, wait.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
Sorry, they scrapped that, didn't they?
Yeah, keep up with the programme. No, that one's gone.
They scrapped that. Sorry, I didn't lay the irony on heavily.
No.
I was playing it for a cynical laugh. So, I mean, that's just appalling. Because a lot of, and I don't mean this in a condescending manner, ordinary people who aren't, by which I mean who aren't aware of the split ticketing thing, would just book the thing through and pay 90 quid more than they should. So the moral is, make your journey up of the single legs and save yourself tens of pounds.
Well, definitely. Well, definitely look at all the options. Yeah, definitely.
Right, quiz.
Quiz.
Yay.
Hey, well, I'll tell you what.
Oh, this was a stonker, this was. How many correct answers to this are there?
Well, it turns out like about 1 million, I think. Yeah, it was quite slightly controversial. Well, controversial is the wrong word, but lots of people had lots of views. The question was this. Where was the steepest section of track that was adhesion worked in Britain that saw regular passenger use? And I thought, oh, that's a really clear question. No, yeah. Well, we did say it could be open or closed. What we didn't say, we should have said, was whether it needed to be on the national railway network or not. So as a result, we got loads of answers. Hence. So somebody said, quite a few people said, actually, the Folkestone Harbour branch now closed. Well, actually, no. It turned out, well, you'll see why in a minute, because it isn't steepest. And we actually ended up having to ask Network Rail, and thank you to Network Rail, for the gradient profile of the Folkestone Harbour branch, which turns out to be 1 in 30. Somebody else said, this was a really smart one. They said the Cromford and High Peak Railway, which is a very famous line, very close to where I used to live up in Derbyshire. The Hopton Incline was 1 in 14. Now, that's proper steep, right? But interesting fact, the only period that had a passenger service was 1833 to 1876, when it was rope worked.
Ah.
When it became adhesion worked, and we did get that bit right in the question, in 1877, of course, the passenger service had ceased. So that doesn't count. Somebody else, this was brilliant, said Fawley Court, which was the late Sir Bill McAlpine's brilliant private railway in near Henley. But but the adjudication jury, which is basically Steph and me, thought long and hard about this and decided that, well, you can't go and that doesn't have a regular passenger service.
No,
and
it
you
didn't
need,
have a regular.
and it's a private railway, so that won't count.
Mate, it's steep. It's about 1 in 13. It's Hopton Incline.
Oh, it's bonkers. I mean, I've been on it, and it is absolutely mad, right? But so no, we decided to discount that. So we decided that the winner was the first person who said Middleton Junction to Oldham Worneth in Oldham, which is actually my place of birth, Oldham.
There you go.
Which was 1 in 27, and that closed to regular passengers in 1958 and completely in 1966. However, somebody else pointed out that the steeper section of adhesion work track in the UK isn't on National Rail because we didn't specify it had to be. It's actually the 1 in. It's actually that'll teach us. It's actually the 1 in 17 on the Docklands Light Railway on the tunnel section up from Bank to the junction with the Tower Gateway branch. And of course, and TfL confirmed that's correct. That is 1 in 17, although they also said they've got some other really steep bits as well. But so we've got 2 winners. We've decided to award a mug to Graham Slack, who was the first person to correctly say Middleton Junction to Oldham Worneth, and to @Tantive4, who was the person who correctly pointed out that the Docklands Light Railway was steeper. So Tantive4, please send us an email with details of how we can send a mug to you. That would be great. And Graham Slack, if you are the same Graham Slack who used to be the master in charge of the Queen Elizabeth Grammar School Railway Society, of which I was a leading light in the 1980s. If you're still that Graham Slack, sir, then do let us know. It'd be lovely to reconnect with you. I haven't spoken to Graham for a very long time, and we will get your mug to you as well.
Now, 2 things I have to say. That was a thumping good quiz question because there was various versions of the truth, wasn't there? So
yes.
We shall have to learn to frame them properly. And the second is I congratulate the 2 winners of mugs because I have to point out that neither Steph or I have got one yet because you haven't posted us one, and we're looking forward to seeing one. So on behalf of Steph and me, can I please ask you to get the bubble wrap out? And, oh, look, there.
They even now have their own little boxes. You can see the mug inside there.
Is that how they delivered?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Well,
so we'll send them.
There's even less excuse then because it's easy to parcel up.
And who knew that a former teacher of mine, classics master from Queen Elizabeth's Grammar School, would end up being the winner? So there you go.
As Woody Allen famously said, or supposed to have said, it's a small world, but I wouldn't like to paint it. Right.
So this week's question.
Oh, sorry, I was going on then. I
know you were.
I was ahead of myself. I'm going to shut up.
And you do. Right. Anyway, so this week's question, it's a bit easier, this one, actually, I think. Which town is reputed to be England's smallest that also has a railway station?
Oh, I have no idea. Normally I can hazard a guess, but I'm completely stumped with that.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm even now going, is it smallest by area? Is it smallest by population? I think it's smallest by area anyway. But anyway, usual pack drill. First comment, first correct answer, however you do it, wins the prize.
And of course, how about this? I'm just thinking about this on the hoof. If any of our loyal viewers and listeners have ideas for questions, we'd like to see them, wouldn't we?
What a great idea. That would be really good. That'd be really good. Because it's usually the thing we do the night before we record, or in this case, on the morning of actually recording, or something like that. But yeah, that's a brilliant idea.
Because with loads of specialists out there who know
Yeah.
an awful lot about about the whole subject in various little chunks across a piece. So if you've got a question which you'd like us to include, then please let us have it. Use your address, email, or via wherever. Whichever channel of communication you like, one of us will pick it up, by which I mean Richard or Steph. So let us move on to our good and positive bits of news. One of Chiltern's Class 168 trains has been named Marylebone, 125 years. The anniversary marks 125 years since the opening of the Great Central Railway on the 15th of March, 1899. The last main line to arrive in London. And in fact, the last, I think, apart from the Colliery the Selby diversion bit I think apart from that, it was the last piece of mainline railway to be built until High Speed 1 opened. The station was designed by Henry William Braddock, civil engineer working for the GCR, considered modest in design at the time due to budgetary constraints. But these days is considered as one of the jewels in the crown of London's railways. It nearly wasn't like that. In the 1980s, when I was publishing books, I delivered books there by car and drove in through the arch, which is a pedestrian arch in there now, the old carriage arch, and pulled up literally at the front of the W.H. Smith stand and handed packets of books to the through the puddles, and there was hardly anybody about, which is why, at that time, Marylebone was under serious threat of closure. Conversion to a high-speed busway whereby Marylebone would be converted into a coach station. British rail services ran via High Wycombe would have diverted into Paddington, and Aylesbury services would have been taken over by London Underground and routed to Baker Street. And in fact, that's one of the things that scuppered it, wasn't it? Because increased commuter services to Paddington and Baker Street used up the capacity that would have been used to divert the stuff from Marylebone, although there were plans formally announced on 15th of March 1984 and closure notices were posted at the station. Very controversial and faced strong opposition from local authorities and the wider public, leading to a legal battle which lasted for 2 years. It proved impractical due to the headroom limitations on the line for the buses, and the closure was quietly dropped. Peter Parker commissioned that survey, and he got some criticism of that, but I think he was being quite clever. He probably knew there'd be an absolute uproar and it'd be chucked out as a result. What do you think?
Oh, he was a smart fella. That wouldn't surprise me in the slightest.
Okay. And of course, under Network South East upgraded the line, and then subsequently Chiltern Trains expanded capacity even further with the various evergreen projects. And the idea now that Marylebone nearly closed is probably inconceivable to many of commuters today, but it very nearly happened. So happy birthday, Marylebone 125. What say you?
Yeah, fantastic. You can't imagine just how different it is today. I remember it in the 80s, and it was a smoky, grim place.
It was.
It's not.
But one of the byproducts of that, because it was smoky, grim, and quiet, was it was a popular location for film and TV makers. I think the Ipcress File had, with Michael Caine, had scenes there, and wasn't one of the Beatles films? Was it Help? Was filmed at Marylebone, so it frequently cropped up in movies.
Before my time, Nigel.
The Battle of Hastings was before my time, Richard, but I've still heard of it. You know. Right, that really is all we've got time for this week. Thanks so much for watching or listening. We adore having your company. And Richard, Steph and I really, really love putting these pods together. So thanks for all your feedback. Keep it coming. We like to see it. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. And that's it for another week. We'll be back, same time, same channel next week. So it's goodbye from me and
from here in Wiltshire, it's goodbye from me.
In Wiltshire. Okay, thanks for being with us in Wiltshire. We'll see you next week.